report whatever you are facing online, whether it's a threat, doxing, image-based abuse, whatever it might be, whatever threat or harm you're facing, and you can receive support. You tell us what you're facing, and based on your location, your profession, the nature of the threat, the perf.org platform, when you hit submit on that report, the perf.org platform immediately creates a personalized list of things that you should do, like action steps to keep yourself safe, and then also points you towards resources that are available to you that are relevant to your exact situation. They're both local and global. And our entire goal there is to be able to support you in that moment of need. And this is something that I personally have experienced, and I know that this is something that I wish that I had when I was taking breaths and when I was going through that awful experience. On the back end, the PERS.org platform, we receive the threats and the PERS.org team reviews them and can actually be your advocate. We have built relationships with all of the social media companies so that when you report a threat or harm that you received on Twitter, X, on any of the Meta platforms, on Discord or Reddit or anywhere, we can act as your advocate to the social media company and flag that threat or harm that you've received so that they will take action in addressing it. And ultimately what we're able to do is to take all of these reported threats that we receive, put them together, and create a database that we can then use to work with global leaders, parliamentarians, legislators, policymakers, everyone who has a position of influence in order to actually be able to pass legislation, regulations, make technical solutions, whatever it might be, so that we can actually solve for these issues and don't just treat the symptoms. First.org is essentially a platform that I wish had existed when I first started taking breaths, and I truly hope that we're able to be able to serve you and support you if you are ever in this situation, and hopefully together we can work on actually solving for this global growing problem.
Thank you, Sherry. And if you haven't visited perth.org already, it is already up and running. It is there. What we're going to do, though, with this next stage over the next 90 days is work that at the end of that experience on ROSA, you will be asked a question of, do you require financial assistance to address this problem? And then it moves over to Samantha and her team at Freedom House. So do you want to take it from there, Samantha?
Yes, definitely. And I just wanted to say hi very quickly and just to echo, I think, the excitement and, I think I'm really proud of what we've sort of built already in terms of groundwork. And, I'm just very excited to actually begin to help. So as was mentioned earlier, my name is Samantha Kelsey. I'm a senior program officer for Freedom House's Emergency Assistance Program. We have been around since 2007, and we are a global program and typically provide grants in around 132 countries annually. So at its core, the Emergency Assistance Program provides short-term financial assistance to at-risk human rights defenders, survivors of religious persecution, those working on LGBTIQ+ issues, and non-traditional advocates who we define as individuals that don't have a history of human rights activism and are therefore largely excluded from other protection mechanisms out there, but are stepping up at key moments to advocate around a specific issue related to anti-corruption, accountability, transparency, and similar concepts. And while this is not relevant to this specific thing, but we also have a specific fund that works in Afghanistan. The financial assistance we provide is meant to be flexible and can be tailored to anything that helps mitigate and prevent further threats to these individuals at risk because of their work. We have a number of categories we can fund, like legal assistance, humanitarian assistance, dependent support, trial monitoring and prison visits, relocation support, medical assistance, including psychosocial support, and a number of other categories. In terms of our identity, I would say we are unique in the emergency assistance space because of the range of our beneficiaries. We have supported everyone from grassroots organizations to religious minority groups to medical professionals to student movements to whistleblowers to indigenous communities to representatives within the UN system and many more. Throughout the years, we have kept this enduring goal of expanding our networks and establishing and deepening trust among diverse communities to truly make sure we're serving those most at risk and at all levels of engagement within the human rights space, not just the most well-known and popular activists. So I'm really honored and excited that we're continuing the spirit to include supporting women in politics. One, of course, is because there really isn't a mechanism currently in place to support these women in a holistic way, as Bonita and Moira mentioned earlier, even though they face complex and layered threats because of the public engagement. And two, because historically we as an emergency assistance program haven't engaged as much with political activists and politicians because of previous restrictions in our mandate. And yeah, maybe I'll leave it there. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Samantha. So you can see one of the reasons we wanted to show you all this is because in January, when Rosa is sent to everyone and we share the way we'll do this, which is through a protected data system, you'll have codes, you'll have all of these things that protect your identity throughout this process, is also because we're among friends here. And we adapted a program when we put this program together, we knew we couldn't do it alone. We had political relationships, but we don't have the resources that Freedom House has to distribute funds. Sherry has the software and the relationships with the technology companies, but not necessarily the people who need it most. So like everything that feminists do when we put together solutions, we look for each other and we build upon each other to build this program. When it launches, the next stage will also be to go deeper in two different ways. And there's some things that I want to talk to you all about and get your feedback on, because this will be the first of what will be many sustained conversations about how we make this work for our community. The first is that we know we have to go deeper. It can't just be an online thing. It has to be an understanding of the localized mental health support, localized legal support that can exist. So within the first year, we're looking at expanding in 3 countries to have an understanding of what that network is, and we plan to grow that over time. So we'll start with 3 pilot countries to do that. The second is really, as Samantha said, there's some definitions around this that we have to get straight. We also have to understand what we can use the money for and what we can't. So for instance, we've been asked to describe, and it might make you laugh, and it's okay if it does because it's a macabre laugh, to help create a definition of what extreme forms of tech-facilitated gender-based violence are. So not your run-of-the-mill tech-facilitated gender-based violence, but what is extreme? And how do we make sure we help those women? And we all sort of smile, a polite smile, when we hear this, because we know that, what is the difference? What is the distinction between the violence you face every day online versus an extreme form of violence you face online? So that's the second area that we really want to explore. The third is around the area of safe spaces. We hear repeatedly, and I'm sure our elected officials in the room will have thoughts on this, about the need to create a space where you can relate to other people who've experienced this. But we also know that that comes with risks of political opponents, perhaps vulnerability of where you're having that conversation and it leaking out. The fact that this is all very personal, and it can also re-traumatize you and put you through that experience over and over again when you hear the story of someone else. That's probably our most delicate and where we want to have a real conversation about how to do that right, how to meet that need responsibly. And we're going to need to depend on everyone in this room who's been through that, who has that understanding to help us have that conversation. Before we get to that conversation, I know Sherry in particular has a hard stop. So if you've in the room sat here and gone to perth.org and checked it out, I wonder if anyone has any questions for Sherry before she has to leave us virtually. No? I guess not, Sherry. I will say before I let her go, Sherry, can you give us a sense of where the barriers are with the social media companies in getting this addressed? Like, I think when you experienced it, the question we hear over and over again is, why is this so hard? Why is it not so obvious to you? And why can't you even email me back? You sat in that chair. You actually, if you were looking for the person that asked the head of government for Meta why he wouldn't get back to her, that's Sherry. So we do have a question in the room, but I want you to answer that first.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the only answer I can come up with, like the most generous response I have for that is that this is not what the social media companies were designed to address. They started with this idea that they were, creating a platform where people could connect, and they were not there to police anything, or to, monitor or address any sort of issues among people. They just were creating the platform on which people could connect. At this point, social media is a tool, and like any other kind of tool, it can be used for good or for bad. And unfortunately, the bad is really, in some ways, taking over on some platforms. The reporting process on social media platforms is very broken. It's not well thought through, it's not well designed, and clearly it's not well monitored or managed. And I hope that we can prompt that change through both Perth.org's work and through our coalition with the Rosa platform, and then of course with all of you. Together, really, this is the only way we're going to be able to get it addressed. When I was recording all of the threats that I received, you hit submit, and I had about, one day I woke up to about 30 something, almost 40 death and rape threats. After meeting with Secretary Blinken, that meeting became public, and then I became the target of a really vicious online violence campaign. And I am one of the lucky ones. My organization was actually a Meta partner. I was able to work with a security firm, Equality Labs, which had a connection at Meta. I had friends that worked at Meta. I was reporting threats. So there are 4 different actors reporting all the threats that I'm receiving, and I still didn't get a response from Meta. And it just so happened that a week later, I had been invited to a lunch that Nick Clegg was speaking at. Nick Clegg is the #2 person, executive at Meta, and I was able to ask him on the record when Meta didn't have a better policy in place to address death threats, and that's how I got my death threats addressed. And that is not scalable or sustainable. It's not how it should be. And so that's what our hope is with Perth, to be able to both democratize that access to the social media platform, and then hopefully to prompt them to fix some of the reporting processes and management that they have in place. It's not survivor informed right now. Their reporting process is very technical. It doesn't take into account people's experience. It doesn't ask for any additional information. It doesn't allow you to even categorize the nature of the threat, really. Their categories are very broad and don't exactly, I was getting death threats, and the 2 closest categories that they had were bullying and harassment and violence and dangerous organizations. And I would argue that neither of those things Um, so the reporting process is very much in need of fixes. And with the Proof Photo platform, we've really taken time and effort to make sure that it is trauma informed. We're not trying to re-traumatize anybody. We're actually trying to provide support, and make sure that people know that they're not alone and that help is available, and we are going to do our best to make sure that the social media platforms respond.
Question in the room. I think you can just,
Okay.
yeah.
Hi, Sherry. Can you hear me? I'm so sorry this happened to you. I'm so sorry. I guess I'm just going to, my question is going to piggyback off the question she asked, right? And I'm just very particular. For example, we know Meta has like they have like a structure for reporting, as best as they claim to have it. So the community practice, the community guidelines, X or something like that in particular. We know these things work. Like you said, it's quite broken. But from my experience and the work that I have done, I've had so much trouble, right, with Telegram. And we know very recently the CEO of Telegram was arrested, is being tried, and all of that. But then it just got me thinking about the kind of structure, right, that we need to put in place. While Meta is going to say, oh, we are doing this, we are doing that, whether they do it or not, they are just, they're out there looking good, quote and unquote, to say, oh, these strategies are in place. Telegram is not that kind of platform. Telegram is not ready to be held accountable for anything. So, with the proliferation of technology and the way we see this, we're probably going to have even more Telegrams, right? Cases I have some Telegram platforms with over 100,000 people on there, and all they do is share non-consensual intimate images of people. So, essentially, my question is, how can we create a structure, or what kind of structure do we need to create that's particularly just a little bit more platform holders accountable, particularly when it comes to the protection of women and girls? And I guess it's a question for everybody to.
I just want to make sure I got the full question. So what sort of structural changes do we need to put in place?
Yes, and Telegram in particular, if you have thoughts.
So Telegram is one of the toughest platforms, I would say, for us to be able to address. I do take some heart in the announcement that came out earlier this week that Telegram, in the wake of the CEO being arrested in France, journalist or activist or elected official or public figure, you're getting an onslaught. You're getting, tens, dozens, hundreds, thousands maybe of harassing messages and threats. And that is not considered by the social media platforms. With PERF, we've changed that. We want to make sure that we are understanding what you're facing. So when you go to PERF.org, you can report as many threats at once across all platforms. like you're taking a chisel to the problem, like it's one small task. But if you report it to pers.org, we're essentially giving us your chisel, and we take all of those
member of the APNIC. Um, as politicians, as women in politics, we really face a lot of challenges, especially when it comes to online abuse, and it's something that as women we really need to work together, even with most of the stakeholders like yourself. And I really have to appreciate that you have come up with this program, that you really went to work with us, especially now that we are going towards an election period. A lot of women out there, they fear to join politics because of they don't want to be exposed online. They are afraid of putting their lives on being exposed to online attacks and whatever. So with the program that you us as politicians to be reporting on the abuses that we will be facing as we go towards this election, to me it's something that is commendable. And as women politicians, we really have to work together, so that we shouldn't do it on your own, but you also have to hear from us what are the issues, what strategies can be done so that we curb this practice. Otherwise, if we want to move forward to have a lot of women join politics, we want to have women to go far with their careers, to be in those top positions. But if we still have this problem, then we will fail, because we'll not go that far. In Malawi, it's an issue. Honestly, in Parliament at the moment, we are only 40 women. It's a Parliament of 193 members of Parliament. Now we are only 40. That's about 20%. But we want to have more women in the coming next election in 2025. But how can we achieve that? We really need to push our fellow women to come in and join. But if they feel weak, they can't join because they are afraid that they will be attacked online, then we will lose it out. So it is a good program.
and we really support you and work together, especially through our chairperson, Honorable Nima, who is here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank the presenters. My name is Sarah Opendi. I'm a member of parliament from Uganda. And what I want to state is that nothing has come easy for women. We've come a long way and struggled to even get to the political space. And therefore, even getting to the political space without this online space has been a challenge. And women have still been abused, but we have soldiered on. And all that I want to state is that let's encourage women to soldier on. There is nothing that will come easy, and nothing that will that women will achieve without struggling, because all these spaces are still dominated by the men. So let's soldier on, let's work together. And of course, we have in some countries some legislation that helps us in a way. It helps people know that you don't have to go to certain extremes. So the legislation is important, but for me the courage is more important. Let's fight on. Let's all be the change that we want to see in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm Nema Lugangira, Member of Parliament in Tanzania. I personally have very special thanks to NDI because I think this project, it's a unique project in the sense that it is starting from an ask from actual women in politics, rather than being organizations sitting by themselves in the head offices, coming up with interventions that they think are needed and trying to find where to fit it. For the last 3 years or 4 years since being a member of parliament and actively using social media and having experienced insane amount of online abuse, I decided to voice the impact of online abuse on women in politics, because unfortunately, I think even my colleagues here from policy would know, initially policy was doing things to do with online violence, etc., but for all other groups, not women in politics. So I would constantly be on their case, what about women in politics? Similarly with NDI, what about women in politics? Because it's assumed that if you're in politics, everything that happens, you know, you've already decided to be in politics, so you should just shut up and take it. But it has huge, huge impacts. So I'm very, very grateful to NDI, Perth, USAID, and everybody who's behind this project, because you have no idea the amount of women who this is going to support. In most parliaments, I can probably say maybe more than 90% of women are not online. And they're not online because of abuse. And what that does is that it negatively impacts the re-election of those women, because when you're not visible, people are not going to vote for you, or it's assumed they're not doing much work. And then it also shrinks those who are aspiring to get to politics. So the program or the project is coming at a timely time, because most countries are going to be in election this year and next year, up to 2026. The only thing that for now I can suggest is, yes, the project is going to provide support to those who are victims. But I think it's important to also have components for those who are not yet victims, because we have to be online. So to have both sides to try and see, whilst I'm ongoing in my campaign period from within political parties, within party primaries to all the way to elective, what sort of support can I get? You know, to protect myself, to cope with the online abuse, because I still have to be online. I still have to share about my campaignings. I still have to do all of that. Like, let us not wait until when I get to actually be a victim, because, you know, Otherwise, still the main issue is we want more women to be online so that they can be visible. The best way for anybody to be, for your message to be known, for your work. Let me take myself for example. We're going for election next year. You know, I want people to see the work that I've done in the last 5 years. The easiest and cheapest option for me is that I have a phone, I need my mobile data. So I can literally do it myself on my phone. But how am I going to do it if I don't feel that safety of me being online and I don't know how to navigate the space? So I think that's one thing that we also need to think about. The other thing is, since this is a global program, I'm sure there is access. Perhaps during these 90 days, we can organize like a candid discussion with the social media platforms. Because I personally have put a lot of complaints. You know, you report, someone has blatantly abused you, but it's written in Kiswahili. So when I report, it will ask me which of the things does it fit, and probably I will say hate speech, targeted speech, right? Sometimes I even go as far as trying to paint the picture of what it says in Kiswahili, what does it, you know, contextualize it. But then the people would reply and say, there is no, what's the term they said? That there's no violation that was found. Then you're thinking, this is insane. This is downright violation. Maybe it's just because of the language that has been used. So all of those things need to be taken into account, because if we report and they see that this is a woman in politics reporting, because you can tell from their account, like they shouldn't just do like the normal automatic rejecting that there is no violation. No. There's a day I reported like 6 different posts, and they were all like terribly abusive, but all of them were like no violation. So I think those are things that we need to work together on in these next 90 days that you're going to be preparing. But I'm personally very excited about this. I hope that there will be opportunity to provide digital resilience training to women in politics. And I know you said that there's going to be pilot countries, but if there are prominent women who fall in the group of being highly targeted, but maybe they don't fall in those respective countries, I think consideration should be made for them. Like it shouldn't be, you know, cut stone that, you know, if I'm not from Uganda, then forget it. You know, we need to find ways, because there are few women who will go out there for elective, who will go out there for politics. To conclude, next year we're going to have in Tanzania female president running, because last time she ran as a running mate. So this time she's going to run as a presidential candidate. And there's already insane amount of abuse. So you can imagine if it happens at that level, what's going to happen at my level, what's going to happen at those below me. So I think you need to also put special attention to such countries. Namibia is also going to have a female presidential candidate, fingers crossed. So she'll probably also need that kind of support and navigation around her, to making sure that she has that online kind of protection. And just to conclude, I always say on behalf of all women in politics, we have no issue of being criticized. Criticize us. But I think this project can help to differentiate between freedom of expression and abuse. Because most of the times we get abuse and people say it's freedom of expression, or you don't want to be criticized, and it's not true. Criticize on what I've said, but you know, when you're now talking about how I look, or how I became a member of parliament in graphicness and everything, as if you were there, that's not being critical. Thank you. But big round of applause to NDI and all of you.
Thank you very much. And I want to, before we seek the input of others, just to clarify, it is going to be globally available. We're going to pick 3 countries at the beginning in which to go deeper, to mature that list of localized psychosocial support, localized legal support. But a point very well taken, especially on the point of, as you all are asked to find other women who will run for office in your country, having a resource that can say, these are steps you should take before, is something I know we've talked to Sherry about, of steps like how do you program your page so that you're protected, you're turning off your geolocation, you're doing other things, I think is already part of Perth, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm putting Sherry on the spot again. Do you want to jump in on that, Sherry?
Sorry, so prevention steps, is that part
Yes,
of Perth?
prevention steps.
Yeah, yes. So Perth is also globally available. We've been doing a massive resource mapping effort globally. We held a hackathon back in June. That was global. It was a 24-hour hackathon. We had participants everywhere from Australia to the Philippines to Taiwan to India to Kenya to Europe and the US and South America. So we have hundreds of resources right now that are global and local in the Perth.org resource library. Like our goal is to build the largest resource library we possibly can of all the resources that are available, everything from emergency funding to legal aid to crisis communications help to mental health support to digital safety tools, physical safety resources, everything that you might need when you're facing threat or harm. And yes, also how-to guides and helplines so that, not only are you supported, you're also able to keep yourself safe preemptively from attacks. Social media right now, the settings on every platform are different and they allow different forms of abuse to flourish. For example, like in my case, the harassment and the hate started on Twitter, and this was when it still was Twitter. But one of the defaults on Twitter is that your DMs are closed unless you actively go into your settings and open your DMs. On the opposite side, Instagram, I didn't know this at the time. I had a private Instagram account, and despite that, even if you have a private Instagram account, your DMs are open. Anybody can send you a DM request. It goes into a different folder, but you don't see what's in the message until you open it. So, of course, you're going to go open it. And that's when you get exposed to all of that vile and violent content and, the threats and the harassment and the real harm, I think, comes in your DMs. And in my case, people had actively made the effort to go from Twitter to Instagram just to send me threats. And so that sort of platform hopping happens a lot. Not just me, I've talked to many others, and research shows that this is the case. And so we need to do more to educate people and to create awareness around the different settings that we need to be changing, and we need to be, the setup that we each need in order to ensure that we are as safe as we possibly can be, whether it's shutting off, turning off, like, show my profile to everyone on LinkedIn. Like, the amount of information that people can gain from LinkedIn about your personal life and then be able to map your personal networks and your contacts from your followers on LinkedIn and Instagram and Twitter and everything, like, it's scary. And we need to be protecting ourselves, unfortunately, because the platforms aren't set up to do that. So we absolutely are putting resources towards making sure that women in elected office or who are running for elected office or who are visible in any way, that they can keep themselves safe.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to contribute this as my final thing, because as you were speaking, I think it's important to realize for some of us, I don't know how it is for members of parliament out of Africa, but for most of us, it's not possible to keep our information private. Because from your community, they're going to know where you live. When they have problems, they come to where you live. When you go to the parliamentary website, your contact is there. So we don't have that luxury, unfortunately. And for example, Perth has been there for I don't know how long, but personally, I heard about Perth for the first time this year. I'm just giving an example. So we have to realize some of us on this side of the world may not know it's there. Meanwhile, we're facing it. So we need to come up with strategies that will make us know, the target audience of this known, to know. And then the pilot countries that are going to be chosen, hopefully you'll also factor in when the election is of those countries. Because if you pick a country and the election is in 2027, while you have countries that have election next year, all of those things need to come into play, etc., etc. We can take other stuff in the next 90 days.
And thank you for that. And I will say, Kaylee and I can show you the spreadsheet of exactly the elections being the first. The second is when the candidate lists are developed, being key indicators of which countries we need to go deeper on. Sherry, did I see you wanting to jump in? Otherwise, I was going to take two questions here, but jump in if you. Go ahead, Sherry.
Yeah. Around where you live, I think I heard not everybody has that luxury, and that's absolutely something that we understand. And that's the case in the U.S. I think that's the case everywhere, where for people who are running for elected office, their address is a matter of public record. That doesn't mean that your social media has to be open, and that doesn't mean that you have to be, you have to be willing to accept all of the threat and abuse online. I think we can do better when it comes to protecting people, at least from receiving all of the graphic threats that you mentioned, and from receiving the abuse under the guise of free speech, and just generally being able to ensure that we're limiting to whatever extent we can. Maybe everybody knows where you live, but that doesn't mean that they get to come and harass you all the time.
And I will say just about Perth. Perth launched, 2 days ago, Sherry?
Sunday night.
So the first place in the world it has been premiered is here at FIFA Africa, because as you said, this is our primary audience. So yes. And I think what we can do is take 2 questions or comments from people here, and then we'll be at time. So we'll go here and here.
Bonsoir, je parle français. Je suis Crispine Nguena, je viens de la République démocratique du Congo. Déjà, le projet est bon, c'est tellement important, surtout pour les femmes, ces femmes publiques, parce que du moment où elles ne sont pas visibles sur le réseau, ça a tendance à faire qu'elles ne sont pas là, et ça a l'impact sur leur engagement. Alors, je vais peut-être revenir sur la question des préventions, parce que là, quand on dit que c'est pour les survivantes, c'est déjà quelqu'un qui elle a déjà été harcelée 1 fois ou 2 fois. Moi, je pense qu'en termes de toutes les questions liées au numérique, digital et tout, il y a une faible accès à l'information, à l'éducation numérique, ce qui fait en sorte que même en termes de savoir se protéger, pour ne pas être survivante, ça crée un souci. Alors moi, j'insiste, je pense que dans les discussions, on est revenu sur ça, les pratiques en amont, qu'en aval, pour venir réparer les dégâts. Je ne sais pas trop si c'est prévu de manière plus claire dans le projet, cette partie d'éducation numérique, parce que les femmes, elles en ont besoin. Moi, dans la pratique, dans mon pays, c'est que d'abord, les femmes politiques, elles ne sont pas là elles ne sont pas là. Donc, si vous voulez savoir qui elle est, il faut aller la chercher dans son village ou bien dans son quartier, par peur de savoir, je ne sais pas gérer vos histoires-là. Alors que c'est sur base de ces réseaux sociaux qu'on analyse aussi la capacité de la personne de pousser un peu la réflexion un peu plus loin. Mais quand elle n'est pas éduque, j'ai dit, pour ne pas me créer de problèmes, je ne touche pas. Alors, je voulais faire vraiment un plaidoyer pour une énième fois, parce que c'est revenu dans les discussions, qu'il y ait une façon de réfléchir en amont. Qu'est-ce qu'on fait pour ces femmes? Merci beaucoup.
Merci. I'm going to ask my colleague Marley, for those of us, especially the participants online who couldn't quite or aren't need a translation.
Yes. Thank you so much for that contribution. She was saying that this is a very important project and thanks us for that, and that this project is really geared towards survivors, but once someone's a survivor, they've already been a victim of abuse, and it's important to also go upstream and not wait until someone becomes a survivor, and continue to bolster digital literacy specifically for women, so they can learn about the possibilities and they can learn the best processes and the way to be safe online, because she's noticed in her country many of the female politicians are not even online. So that was really the gist, and just to reiterate that it's very important to have digital literacy and digital advocacy as well as these response mechanisms for survivors.
Couldn't agree more. I'm going to go over here to this gentleman who.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Abdelkader Boukari. I'm Senior Program Officer at Brigitte Senegal. My question is related to your processes and response mechanisms. Growing up, I've been raised by women, my mom and my grandma. My mom is a public figure. She works at RTS, National TV. But the main troubles she had while working was ethnic slurs to put her down. So my question is, how do you tackle ethnic-based insults and ethnic-based attacks on public women? And in the political field, it's kind of special, because here men use ethnical arguments in order to put you down or put you aside, which results into automatic loss. Or we put complex into your profession. I think we saw it in the past elections, in order to just disqualify you. So I would like to know, what are your psychological measures, and what are your support, how you support people who are affected like that?
That's a very good question, and I think I will take that generally, but I invite my colleagues to jump in, as well as from policy. I think it's probably fair to say very early on in our research with policy, we assumed that if a woman was being attacked on the basis of her faith or ethnicity, it was a gender-based attack. End of story. There was no distinction, because if you take the most marginalized populations in the world, the most marginalized of those marginalized people are the women. So if an ethnic-based slur or attack is being used against a woman, it is usually, and I think this is another very important factor, it's usually coming from within her ethnic community to begin with. We also find, for instance, in political parties, the number one attack isn't from a female politician's political opponent, it's from within her own party, by probably some very upset men who didn't make the list when she won her constituency. And so our research, when we have conducted it over the years with policy, has always assumed that, to track this. That being said, this is still a challenge that social media companies will go over and over and over again in their head, and not really have a good answer to, that meets us where those of us in this room who understand that find that this is a very big space and a very big gap, I would say, with social media companies. But I don't know if Sherry or Kaylee or Samantha want to weigh in on that. Oh, Sherry has to go.
I quickly wanted to mention two things. So first, form, the reporting form, to be survivor-centric. We asked you, what is the motivation behind, what do you believe to be the motivation behind the threat or harm that you're facing? And this sort of exactly, this, you know, ethnic slurs, that is one of the categories that we have in here. So we're able to understand that and then be able to accurately categorize it as hate or harassment. The second piece is, this is where the importance of people reporting to perf.org comes in, so that we can create that database. And that will allow us to take this from being anecdotal, like from being individual experience, to being hard evidence in the form of many, many people who have this experience, and then it becomes research. And then it's really hard for people like global policymakers and social media executives to argue with and to push back against. And then we can use that to be able to drive change and actually be able to create legislation or cultural change or whatever it might be that we need, depending on, you know, the specific location, so that we can ensure that this sort of thing, A, doesn't happen as much, and B, is addressed appropriately. And with that, thank you all so much. I'm so sorry that I have to run. This has been a phenomenal conversation, and I look forward to hopefully working with all of you and providing support wherever we can.
Thank you, Sherry. And Samantha, I wondered if you wanted to jump in on that one in any way, just with the other funds you administer with ethnic minority populations, LGBTQI.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have the most experience, of course, when these online threats translate to offline, you know, physical security threats, and certainly we can address a number of physical security concerns, either around, you know, relocation, you know, these sort of extreme things, or technological support if you need to get a VPN or change your phone or things like this. But otherwise, I think Sherry's question answered it perfectly. She answered it perfectly.
She always does. So I know we don't have enough time to talk about this, but I'm very excited. I'm very excited to work with all of you. I want to end on one happy note, and that Kaylee introduced me to a female parliamentarian from Somalia who had to leave Somalia because of the abuse she was facing online. She was able, through her own resources, to track one of her attackers to the Netherlands. And because they have laws and a rule of law, she was able to sue her attacker in court and get a conviction. And, you know, so she's amazing. I just, as I've said to many of the political women who've been here and I always reflect on this as something that Hillary Clinton told me when we were doing this, when she said, imagine if we didn't have to work this hard just to get in the room. What we could do if we could spend this time and energy to be able to help the people in our communities and in our countries. And that's driven me to try to enable that space where we could actually concentrate on solving the problems that all of our political leaders have entered the arena to solve. And so I want to take this problem off their plate, and we're not going to stop until we do. So thank you all for joining us in this effort. We will be in touch with all of you. We'll provide all the information. If you go to ndi.org, you will see a picture of the Honorable Nima from a few years ago, and I launching this sort of thought process in Ethiopia at the IGF because we wanted to pay tribute to where it all started. And yeah, we've got 90 days. Clock is ticking, and you'll meet Rosa. So thank you for coming. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.